The moment that realization settles in, the space around him doesn't reward him with relief or clarity like some kind of cheap resolution. Instead, it tightens, almost testing whether he actually meant what he said or if this is just another temporary acceptance he will abandon the second things get uncomfortable, and for a while nothing happens, just silence stretching longer than it should, forcing him to sit with his own thoughts without distraction, without escape, and that in itself becomes unbearable in a way he didn't expect. Because he's spent so long avoiding exactly this kind of stillness, and now that he's in it, he realizes how loud his own mind actually is when there's nothing else to drown it out, every unfinished thought looping back around, every unresolved memory pressing forward, and he almost breaks again right there, almost looks for anything to interrupt the process. But this time, there's nothing to grab onto, no version of himself stepping in, no shifting environment to redirect his focus, just him, standing in a space that now feels less like a void and more like a mirror that hasn't decided what to reflect yet, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, details begin to form again, not chaotic this time, but deliberate, controlled, like the environment is responding directly to his willingness to stay present instead of run, and what appears first is a room, incomplete at the edges, but familiar enough to make his chest tighten immediately, because he knows this place, or at least a version of it. And as the walls solidify, he recognizes it fully, a memory he hasn't revisited in a long time. Not because he forgot it, but because he chose not to look at it too closely, and before he can process that fully, the scene begins to move. Not around him, but with him inside it, and suddenly he's no longer observing, he's there, in the moment, watching himself from just slightly outside his own perspective, and it's disorienting at first. That split awareness of being both inside and outside the memory at the same time, but the discomfort isn't what hits hardest, it's the clarity. The way everything he ignored before is now impossible to miss, every hesitation, every micro-expression, every second where he could have chosen differently but didn't, and he feels it all now with an intensity that wasn't there the first time. Like the emotional weight has been restored in full, and instinctively he tries to intervene, stepping forward, reaching out as if he can change what already happened, but the moment resists him, not pushing him back, but simply continuing without acknowledging him, because this isn't a place where he gets to rewrite things. This is a place where he has to understand them, and the version of him inside the memory makes the same choices, says the same words, walks away at the same point, and it's almost worse knowing exactly what's coming and still being unable to stop it. And when the moment ends, it doesn't fade gently, it snaps, collapsing back into that in-between space, and he's left standing there again. But now there's no confusion about what just happened, and before he can fully process it, another scene begins to form, different place. Different time, same underlying pattern, and this time he doesn't try to stop it, he just watches, tense but aware, noticing things he had ignored before, the way his tone shifted, the way the other person reacted, the point where everything could have gone differently, and again it plays out exactly as it did. And again it ends without giving him the chance to change anything, and this continues, one memory after another, not randomly, but carefully selected, each one highlighting a different aspect of the same issue, avoidance, deflection, control, and with each repetition something shifts in him. Not dramatically, but steadily, like layers being stripped back one at a time, and eventually the pattern becomes undeniable. So obvious that it almost feels ridiculous. He didn't see it sooner, and when the next scene begins, he stops it before it fully forms. Not by force, but by recognition, and the space pauses, waiting, and he exhales slowly. The weight of everything settling into something more structured, less chaotic, and when he speaks this time, it's not reactive, it's grounded. I see it, and that changes something immediately. The environment stabilizes further, the fragments aligning instead of clashing. And the versions of him reappear, but not scattered or confrontational, just present, observing. And one of them, the same exhausted one from before, nods slightly, not approving, not dismissive, just acknowledging. Then don't ignore it again. And it's not a warning, it's a condition, and he understands that now, that this process isn't about a single realization. It's about what he does after it, and the space around them begins to shift once more. But this time it feels less like being pulled into something and more like being guided forward, and as the next phase starts to take shape, one thing is clear in a way it hasn't been before. He's not being forced through this anymore. He's choosing to continue. And that choice is going to matter more than anything that came before. And the moment that choice becomes conscious, the entire space reacts in a way that feels fundamentally different from everything before. Not violently, not chaotically, but with a kind of unsettling precision, like something has been waiting specifically for him to reach this point. And now that he has, the rules shift again, the environment no longer pulling memories at him without control, but instead opening pathways. Subtle at first, branching directions forming out of the once formless space, each one carrying a different emotional weight that he can feel without even stepping into them. Like standing at the edge of multiple versions of himself that could still exist depending on what he chooses next. And that realization hits harder than any memory replay ever did, because this isn't about the past anymore. This is about consequence, about continuation, about the fact that he is still actively shaping what comes next whether he admits it or not. And for a second he hesitates. Not out of fear of what he'll see, but out of the understanding that he can't pretend ignorance anymore. He can't say he didn't know. And the silence stretches again, but this time it isn't suffocating, it's expectant, and slowly he steps forward. Not into one of the fully formed paths, but into the space between them, testing whether he still has that instinct to avoid committing. To linger in uncertainty where nothing has to be decided, but the moment he does, the space rejects it, not harshly but firmly. The pathways fading slightly as if to say that indecision is no longer an option here, and he exhales a quiet, almost frustrated sound, because that was always his fallback, staying just outside of choices long enough to convince himself he still had control, and now even that is gone. And behind him the versions of himself remain, silent but present, no longer guiding, no longer explaining, just witnessing. And somehow that makes this harder because there's no one left to argue with, no one to deflect onto. Just him and the weight of what he's about to choose, and eventually he moves, not confidently but deliberately, stepping toward one of the paths that feels heavier than the others, not because it's darker, but because it feels more honest, more direct, like it won't let him hide inside it. And as soon as he crosses into it, the space reshapes again, the other paths fading out of view, leaving him fully immersed in this direction, and the environment that forms isn't abstract this time, it's immediate, real, present. Not a memory, but a possibility, a projection of what happens if he continues forward without falling back into his old patterns. And it's not dramatic or extreme, it's subtle, almost frustratingly normal, a conversation handled differently. A moment where he stays instead of leaving, a decision where he chooses discomfort over avoidance, and at first it feels underwhelming. Like after everything he's been through, he expected something more intense, more defining. But as it unfolds, he starts to understand that this is the point. That change isn't some massive shift all at once. It's built out of these smaller moments that don't feel significant until they start stacking up. And as he moves through this projection, he notices the differences, not just in himself, but in the responses around him. How people react when he doesn't deflect, when he doesn't shut down, when he doesn't try to control the outcome before it even happens. And it's uncomfortable, sometimes painfully so, because there's no shield anymore, no distance. But there's also something else there. Something steadier, something that doesn't collapse the moment things don't go perfectly. And the longer he stays in it, the more stable the space becomes, less like a simulation and more like something that could actually hold. And then, just as he starts to settle into that realization, the scene fractures slightly, not breaking apart but pausing, like it's waiting for input again. And he feels it immediately, that familiar pressure returning, but in a different form. Not forcing him backward, but asking whether he's going to keep going or retreat now that he understands what it requires. And for a moment, the old instinct flickers, that urge to step back, to return to something easier, something known. But it doesn't have the same pull anymore, not after everything he's seen, and when he looks back, the space behind him is no longer fully accessible. The path he came from blurred, distant, not gone but no longer immediate, and that final bit of hesitation fades, replaced by something quieter but more solid, and without saying anything this time, without needing to justify it or explain it. He steps forward again, deeper into the path, and as he does, the environment stabilizes completely for the first time, not perfect, not finished, but real enough to continue, and somewhere behind him the versions of himself begin to fade. Not because they're gone, but because they're no longer needed in the same way, and as the space shifts into whatever comes next. One thing is clear in a way it hasn't been before. This isn't something he's being dragged through anymore. It's something he's actively building. Step by step, whether he's ready or not.